Welcome to part 20 in this series of videos on how to create a simple purchase order system using Blazor and C#. To be able to email or print a purchase order, we need a means of creating a report in a visually pleasing format suitable for presenting to a supplier. This is the end result that I'll be aiming for. This was inspired by a search that I made on the internet and found this item on GitHub. The address up here, I'll put in the link at the in the description of the video, but basically it's a very simple format and it looks reasonably nice. So we'll be using that as the starting point for our code. We'll be taking the sample code for the Spark Suite simple invoice and modifying it to produce our order layout. If you haven't already, open the project in C# and we're going to add a new Razor component in the Pages folder called Preview Order Page. So right-click on Pages, add Razor component, and we'll call it Preview Order Page. And the first thing we're going to do is delete all the code out of there. Then we're going to go to the GitHub repository for the Spark Suite simple HTML invoice template and scroll down until you see invoice.html. Click on that and this will open a page with all the code on it. So copy all the code. Control C, back to our project, Control V to paste it. And in here, we've got basically the style sheets at the top and with the HTML body in the middle here. So we have got some problems in here. So this media section, I want to delete. And while we're about it, we could delete this right to left RTL section. And I also want to put a page directive at the top saying page is preview order. If we save this and run it, you should be able to get the simple Smart Suite example. And if we just append preview order on here, there you see we've got the Smart Suite example. Fine. What I want to do with our page is you'll see that this is made up of basically the HTML section is made up of one table with various rows. So we've got a row for the top, which is the logo and address, a bit more, another row for the who it's going to and who it's for the attention of. And then we've got the bottom part with the details of everything. Now I want to tackle it slightly differently. If I now show you the example, this is the way I anticipate our purchase order looking, but I want to split it into 4 separate tables. We're going to have one for the logo and our address, another table to show the supplier and our order information such as the order number, the order date and the contact, another table for the purchase order header or description, and then a further table showing the items that are being ordered. So let's have a look at how we can achieve that. The first thing we want to do is we want to be able to preview the order report by selecting an order from the purchase order list on the index page. Now we already have a toolbar above the order list. So if we go to the index page, and find the toolbar. We see we've got a toolbar handler, and these are the toolbar items that we've got at the present. So I think what we want to do there is add another toolbar item that allows us to gain access to the preview order. So if I just copy this into here. So what I'm doing here is bringing in another toolbar item. I'm adding it. I'm going to give it a text of preview, a tooltip of preview selected order, and a prefix icon of E-print. Now to implement this, we need to go to the toolbar handler, and we've got a section for add, edit, delete, and what we now want is another section for if the user clicks the preview item. So if I again bring some code in here, so if the text item equals preview, if the user has failed to select a purchase order, i.e. selected PO header ID equals 0, it's going to give a warning saying please select an order from the grid, and then open the warning dialog, which you've seen in previous videos. Otherwise, it's going to navigate to the preview order. So we can check that works by running it. So let's see what happens. So we've now got a preview on here, and if I select an order, click preview, it opens up that sample Spark Suite section that we had there before. So that hasn't changed yet. We haven't made any changes to that. Right, so let's close that. So let's have a look at this preview order. And the first thing is that we don't need, well, what I want to do is move the style out completely for the moment. I'll Control X to cut it, and I'm just going to put it at the bottom here. So the style section is separate, and then I want to get rid of the various tables that the table that we've got, but I want to keep the invoice box. But before we do that, let's get rid of this head section. We don't need that. So I'm going to get rid of this table, and we're going to bring in some tables of our own. So the first one is this, and this is the table for the top where we've got the logo, and I'm linking to a web address which just happens to be Blazor code. This could be a file on your system, and I've set the style width to 100, a max width of 300 pixels, and then you'll see here that's a class called address bar, and the logo is address bar left. We'll have a look at this in a second, and the address of the company issuing the order I've hard coded, and that's got a class of address bar right. Arguably you might have this information in a control file, but for this purpose it just seems easiest just to have it hard coded. And the next thing that we therefore need to do is add these classes, these CSS classes for address bar left, and address bar right. So let's go down to the bottom of our style section and bring that code in here. So what that's doing is saying, as a whole, address bar is going to be vertically aligned to the top. Address bar left is going to be text aligned to the left, and address bar right is going to be text aligned to the right. I want the address to be in bold, and I want some padding at the top. Now I had to play around with this a little bit so that the logo and the address coincided. Obviously the logo, I had a little bit of space around the top of the file that I was bringing in. So I like to test as I go along, so we'll just test this. select an order, and that's our top section. So that's working fine. Now I want to bring in a table that's got the supplier's name and address and our order information. So let me bring that in. And I'm hard coding this for the moment. So I'm saying that the class is still address bar, but I've got three TD sections. First of all, width of 50% for the supplier's name and address, then 15% for the text that says order number, order date and contact, and then lastly width 35% for what will be the order number, order date and requested by. So supplier name and address, and all these are just placeholders for the moment, and we'll fill in the proper information when we've got it. The next one is document type. I'll bring in another table, and that just says the class is doc type and it says purchase order. So we've now got a new class here for the CSS styling, so we need to bring that in as well. And for this, I've got a font size of 20 pixels, a line height of 80 pixels, a color, a font weight of bold, and the text aligned is centered. And for the order lines, I'll skip testing this because I think it'll probably work. For the order lines, we want another section under this table, and this table is going to consist of a heading, which has got the column headings, and I'm putting a class here saying column right for the items that I want to be right aligned. Then we've got a row, just a single row for the moment, with item, and these are just placeholders for product code, product description, etc. But I've got a class saying column right to have those right aligned, and then another class called totals, where we've got the order total placeholder, the net price, the tax, and the order value. So we've got some new classes here, heading, item, and totals. So I need to add those. So we've got heading with a background color, and the bottom border that's going to be solid, and the font weight is going to be bold. Column left is left aligned, column right is right aligned, and the items, I've added a bottom border to them, and the totals, again, there's a background, is going to be bold. I've got a line height of 40 pixels, and by definition, the text align is going to be right. And I'm going to make one small change to the invoice box here. Currently, it's got a maximum width of 800. I just want that to be 1000. Some of our items are going to potentially be quite wide. So if we run the project again now, select an order, preview, you can see we're getting there. This doesn't look quite as I wanted it to do, but we've got the placeholders for supplier, order number, order date, and requested by, product code, product description that I wanted to be left aligned. Some of these look, yeah, the rest of it looks all right, but that doesn't quite line up. So let's close that. And the reason for those things not looking quite right is we've got some superfluous styling here that we don't need. So I'm going to remove everything apart from the invoice box and the invoice box table. I don't think that's actually required, but I'll leave that in there for now. Give it one more go. Select one. That looks better. Things are properly aligned and the spacing looks to be good. So we've basically got the data, sorry, the layout right, but we now need to turn our attention to replacing those placeholders with actual data. So the first thing is that on the index page, at the moment, we're just navigating to preview order. So let's change that. And we want to navigate to, I'll comment that out, the preview order for the selected PO header. That's exactly the same as we did for editing. For example, so where we were editing, we were navigating to the different page, but the selected PO header ID. Same down here. And we now need to change our preview page. So instead of just being that, we need to change it to, and we need to add a code block to here. And what we're doing here is we're adding right, let's also introduce up at the top these items. So we're using the Blazor Purchase Orders data, and we're injecting the IPO header service and the IPO line service, so we can get the order header and order line details. And this code down here is creating an object of order lines by PO header and a list of that's then being turned into a list, and we're also getting the object of the PO header using a new PO header, and we're passing in the PO header ID. So on initialization, the order header is going to be the order PO header service get1 using the PO header ID. Then we're getting the order lines by getting the order lines by PO header, and then we're converting them to a list. So that should enable us to change the table up here for the supplier, replacing the supplier name with, instead of just the placeholder, the actual data. So I've got a table pre-prepared for that, so I'll delete that one and then just replace it with this. It's essentially the same thing, except where before we had just supplier name, I've got the @ sign and then order header, which is the order header object we've got, and then supplier name, address 1, 2, 3, and the postcode, and the same with the purchase order numbers, dates, and so on. The only item of note here really is that the PO order date is being converted to a short date string. The next section to tackle is the order lines, and for this we can use a for each. So instead of having just this item here, just one row, we can have multiple rows by having a for each and looping around the order lines that we're retrieving. So I'm going to delete that and bring in the code for that, which is, so we're saying for each order line in order lines. We've got the same, we're going to create one row for each of these, and the class is item as before, and the data is going to be orderline.poline product code, and then description, and then we're going to have the quantity, unit price, net price, tax rate, tax amount, and gross price. And what I'm doing here is the class is right aligned as before, but I'm formatting them with the correct format, either currency, percentage, or just normal. And I think if we run it now, let's save it and see how we're doing. Right, if we now select an order and click preview, we've got our top table, which has got the logo and address. We've got the supplier's address, the order number, order date, and contact. We've got the detail for each of the purchase order lines here, but we haven't got the order total. Notice also that the supplier's name is missing from here. The reason that the supplier name is missing is that although it's present in the PO header class, which is why we didn't get any errors, it's not being returned by the SQL stored procedure. And we can take advantage of that and modify it, modify the stored procedure so it brings back the supplier's name. But logically, for every purchase order header, there will only be one net price, one total net price, one total tax, one total order value. So maybe a little strangely, I'm going to get these data in the SQL stored procedure rather than trying to do anything fancy on the in the C# code. So let's close that. And if we go to, I'll save everything here. If we go to the SQL, under stored procedures, we've got PO header get one. If I look at that, we'll see that it's simply selecting the header ID, the order number, etc., etc., supplier address, but not the supplier name from the PO header, where the PO header ID is the parameter being passed in. So we need to change this, and I find the easiest way to do this is to copy this and pretend to be creating a view. So copy that. I think I've shown this technique in previous videos, but I'll do the same here. So I'll close that and just pop in here. And I don't want a where on this just yet. So I can run that. And I get the PO headers. So to get the supplier, I want to add the supplier table. And I can link the two by dragging supplier ID across to supplier ID, and I'll select all rows from PO header. I mean, it's not going to make any difference, but it just feels nicer for some reason. And then we can then drop the supplier name by ticking it, and that'll add it to the items down here. Now, the other thing we want is the total of the order lines. So we now right click, add a table, and select PO line. And we'll do the same technique of dragging the header ID over to here and right-clicking on that and selecting all rows from PO header. And now we want to type in here what we actually want. So what we want is the total quantity, the unit price times the quantity, and the quantity times the unit price times 1 plus the tax rate to give us the overall total. Now I'm probably going to edit this to save you watching me type this out. But let me just enter the information that we need there, and I'll get back to you. So this is the SQL that I've entered manually. So what I've got here is null. So I'm checking that if the quantity or the unit price is null, we don't end up with null, we end up with 0. Same for quantity times unit price times the tax rate. This will be the tax, and the quantity times the unit price times 1 plus the tax rate will be the overall order total value. And I'm grouping by all the other columns, and I'm summing the 3 items that we've got at the bottom here. So if I just test it, you'll see that I'm getting some results down at the bottom. So that it looks okay at first pass. Okay, so what I need to do now is take that and copy it, and I need to go back to the stored procedure, and I need to replace, let's just move that down a place. We haven't got a where section in here yet, so I need to replace all this with the item that I've just got from the view, and I need to put that where clause back in here. And I think that should be okay. So I'll just parse it and then execute it. Right, so now I've now changed the stored procedure. I'll put the code for all this in the description, by the way, so don't worry too much about trying to copy this. It's relatively complicated. So now we've got that, we can go back to the C#. But we've got one more thing to change here. On the PO header CS, the class, we've got supplier name, we've got all order total value, but we haven't got net price or tax. So we just need to bring those 2 items in. So now it'll recognize those. And on the totals on here, we don't want our placeholders. So I want to get rid of that and replace it with this. So same class. So we've got the column left on order totals, and then we're formatting the net price, the tax, and the order value. So if I save it and run it, select an item and preview it, it's looking a lot better. So we've got the supplier there, the address, the order number, and order date and contact. We've got all the individual line items, and we've got an order total. And at a rough look, that looks about right. But if I go back to purchase orders and select another one, we have one further problem. There's always one last problem. You never get to the end, and that is that we've got the supplier's name, but in this particular case, we didn't have the full address. We only had the postcode, and it's leaving blank lines where we've got it's leaving blank lines where we've got blank lines. I suppose there's no argument with that. Let's see what this other one looks like. Yes, so that's more demonstrative that we don't want a blank row like that. So let's see if we can deal with that. And there's a very nice way we can deal with that. We can replace the address line 1, address line 2, and address line 3. We'll always have a supplier that if that's blank, then that's just tough luck. We haven't got anything, we don't need to move it up. But for address line 1, 2, and 3, I can remove those and replace it with this. And what that says is if the string is not empty or null, show the address line, otherwise just skip over it. Similarly for address line 2 and address line 3. I suppose we could have done it for supplier name, but there isn't a great deal of advantage, and if the postcode is missing, that's fine. So now if we run it again, and I think it was that one that was causing the obvious problem. So now we've got that blank line has moved up, and if we look at this other one, is it that one? Yes, we've got all the address lines out of the way, and we've now got the name of the supplier and the postcode. So it's looking good. But on reflection, we're showing this with on the same page as all this other stuff. And if we wanted to print it, for example, you could right click and select print, and you'll see that the preview has got its attempt at the nav bar and the login at the top. Now this isn't really what we want at all, so let's cancel that. And what I'd like is a completely blank page, and this can be achieved surprisingly simply. What we need to do is that these pages are based on layout templates, and we can change the way this looks by giving it a different blank layout. So what we're going to do is, I think in shared, I'm going to create a new page. And I'm going to call it just simply blank layout. And I'm going to get rid of everything we've got there. And I'm going to have, oh, I've got it in code, so I've got it here, so I don't need to worry about it. So it inherits the layout component base. I think if you look at some of these other pages, such as the main layout or the nav menu, you'll see that they've got similar things, and we've just got a body. So I'm going to save that. And then on the page preview, I want to insert something beyond, just after the page directive, that just says layout blank. And if we rerun it, select our favorite order, preview, we now get it in a blank page. And if we choose to print it, we've got rid of the menu, we've got rid of the login item at the top, but we are still left with the date and time, and I'm not sure that we can do anything to prevent that. So I'm happy with that. Did I mention there's always one last thing? I think there is yet another one last thing. So this is showing the item, but we have to press the back button to go back to purchase orders. I'm not fussed by that particularly, but we could in fact open the preview in a separate tab. So we may as well see how we can do that. It requires two small changes to the index razor. And at the top, under here, inject navigation manager, we need to inject the IGS runtime, and on the navigation, instead of that line, we want this line. So it's going to open new object preview order plus the selected PO order ID and underscore blank. I couldn't use this curly bracket selected PO header ID in here. It may have worked, but I couldn't get it to work, so I've added it by just concatenating it. So lastly, give it one more go. Select our order, preview, and it opens it in a new page, a new tab, and purchase orders is still there. I dare say I could select another one and preview it, and that would open up in another tab. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but at least we've now got the choice. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for this video. In coming videos, I'm intending to be able to email the report one way or another. In an ideal world, I'd like to email an attached PDF of this. In a less than ideal world, I'd be adding this as HTML to the email itself. But I think I'm probably going to have to settle for a third option, which is to email a link to this. But that's I've yet to work out. So we'll wait for that to see what happens. If you've got any comments, please leave them in the comments section. If you've got any ideas how I might be able to create a PDF from this using free software, I don't want to pay for any particular software, then please put that in the comments. And I'll, as usual, be putting details in the description of the link to the website that has all the code for this and indeed all the code itself. Thank you very much for watching.